What's going on, guys? Elijah from Astrology Secrets. Welcome back to the channel. Please subscribe to this video and turn on the notification button and share the video if you haven't already. And let's just jump right into it. So I want to talk about the most unique houses. And I want to talk about, these are houses which, if you have planets sitting, you'll have an experience that other people can't have. So in terms of life experiences, these houses give you a unique perspective. So to give you an example, let's talk about the first house. I'll go through the houses. In the first house, and this is just the transits right now of what's going on. So let's say the moon is there. This person gets to experience what it's like to have a deeper connection of emotions through themselves. And they think they'll understand themselves more. Being in the sign of Pisces, they may have a broad understanding. But they also will be emotionally understanding of themselves. However, they may miss some deeper truths that, say, if we put Mercury into that house, or that the person might be able to realize. Okay. So planets in certain houses do different things. And when we put them in some specific houses, which are 5, 8, 9, and 12, I believe these houses are the houses where, without planets sitting in them or strong aspects, okay, by strong aspect I mean like an exalted planet or, some strangely double debilitation aspecting that house, whereas the sign is sitting there alone, because empty houses are not really empty houses, but, I'm sure we'll get into that in another video. So let's say you have a bunch of, for the sake of this example, let's say you have a bunch of planets in the 5th house, which this house is empty as of the transits right now. But it's not empty because the moon is there. So I'm thinking about, the average person right now at this time should be thinking about themselves and how they relate to the 5th house, being their children, their ancestors, their family, their status, that sort of thing. So let's say we have Saturn, let's say we have Mercury, let's say we have Jupiter, Mars, whatever, in the 5th house. This person will eventually get to experience what it's like to be recognized, okay, what it's like to be known, and the 5th house is also the house of fame. So whether that's on a small level, as in your community, your job, or whether that's on a big scale, as in the masses, which the 5th house does rule the masses as well. The 11th house does, but the 5th house is aspecting it. So let's say you have a lot of planets there. Now you have a unique perspective compared to someone with planets in their first house. And while every house will give you a quote unquote unique perspective, the reason I bring up 5th, 8th, 9th, and 12th is because these are perspectives that we can't understand without experience. So like we can say, I wish I was famous, and wow, that person must have an interesting life, but we don't know what it's like to be famous unless we are, right? So that's why the 5th house is pretty unique, versus if I move on to the 2nd house here. Now let's say we have a lot of planets in the 2nd house. We might make a lot of money. Well, that's pretty unique too, but that's not the only house you can make money from. And you might take in more food than other people. But again, we all get to experience eating food. We all get to experience having money. We get varying degrees of this. So based on the planets that are there, there's varying degrees of these things. However, I feel like the 5th house is a little bit different because there's just a disconnect. Some people, if you don't have a certain level of fame, the person may never understand what that's like. Okay. And now let's move on to the 8th house here, because I mentioned that is another one. If you don't have planets there, you probably don't know what is going on with that house or strong aspects. So everyone in this life will get to, well, not everyone, but the vast majority will get to experience what it's like to have sex, to go through ups and downs at some point. And what the 8th house does is it shows us that, if someone has a planet sitting there, they understand, or they've been through experiences that cause them to understand deep secrets, deep truths, Some of them are darker. Okay, some of the deep secrets in this world are darker. And you know, that's just, if you don't have planets there, you just don't know. It's one of those kind of, almost the 8th house and 12th house are kind of like those Illuminati placements where you know if you have it, kind of thing. So that's why this is a very unique house, and one of those houses that, like, you just have to have planets there to understand. If you're going through an 8th house dasha, you understand there's some ups and downs. You understand you know more than the average person in terms of what's really going on in the world. So again, it's one of those houses that's pretty unique compared to, now let's talk about the 3rd house. With the 3rd house, let's say we've got a few planets there. We can say this person communicates more. This person has, you know, depending on what planet it is, let's say it's Mercury, or no, let's give an example of Saturn. Then maybe they have some problems with their extended siblings, or not really extended siblings, but they're, you know, they're brothers and sisters, and cousins and aunts and uncles and whatnot. Well, you know, that's a unique experience, but we can kind of understand, like, because most people have some sort of problems within their family or social networks. So we can kind of grasp that someone's life experience, while we can't understand it fully, we can kind of grasp what that would be like. So is that making sense? You can kind of understand why someone's life is happening a certain way, but if you had a planet in the 8th house, nobody understands why your life is like that. So it's a unique thing to have planets in the 8th house. And the 8th house is a little bit more in the 5th house. Okay. So if I narrow these down, really, I think the very most unique placements are the 8th and 12th. Having planets in the 8th house or the 12th house really gives us a perspective that no one else can have. Okay. But that said, I want to move on to the 9th house and explain why the 9th house is very significant. So the 9th house, someone with, depending on the planets there, and this is a good example, let's say Sun and Mercury are there, and it's in the sign of Scorpio. This is almost a perfect example for this video. So let's say this person was raised religious, and then once Mars kicked in, okay, 8th house Mars kicked in, which is ruled by Scorpio, which is the number 8 here. So once Mars kicked in, the person lost their faith. What a unique perspective that is, to have full faith into something and then not have it anymore. Okay, especially a religion, and or some sort of, you know, religious teachings. Not many people get to experience that. You know, a lot of people are born atheist. A lot of people are born religious. A lot of people are born, you know, not believing in religions, just being kind of open-minded, mostly believing in something, but not fully. But with these placements here, it could show someone that fully believed in something and then left it. So, or for whatever circumstances, like, hit them in the face, and then they're like, okay, maybe if my faith is not real. So that's pretty damn unique. That's why the 9th house can be super unique perspectives. If someone fully believes something, and let's think of a Christian, for example. If someone was a Christian their whole life, they've got a very unique life compared to the other the other people in this world. And, you know, that's just, maybe that's not the life we'd wish for necessarily from our perspective, but it's a very unique life, so it had to be mentioned in this video. So 9th house can make someone religious, especially with the sun sitting there, especially with Saturn sitting there. And when someone becomes religious, unless, you know, in this case where Scorpio's there, it can change it, then that's also a unique perspective. But being religious or having a transformative experience with your religion, I think, is pretty damn unique. So that's one of those things that I feel like the 9th house has to be unique for that reason. Okay. Another way I've seen this happen is if Uranus is sitting in the 9th house. Definitely I've seen transformations with religions happen. Okay. And then the last unique house I'm going to touch on is the 12th house. The 12th house, the 8th house is like our deepest understandings of this world, and the 12th house is like our understandings of what's beyond. So if you have planets in the 12th house, you have, I would say they're even more unique than the 8th house. Though the 8th house is like unique because you understand this world and things that nobody else will understand in this world. But the 12th house will teach you spiritual gifts, will teach you spiritual goodies, so to speak, that just no one else will have. Like maybe you'll fly to the fucking sun or fly to the moon and come back. And that's totally possible if you have planets in the 8th house. 12th house. So that's one of those things. Like the 12th house has the most crazy spiritual enlightening experiences. So if you don't have a lot of planets there, or you don't have any strong aspects, well, you don't know what that's like. Okay. Now I want to compare the other houses just for reference. The 4th house, if someone has a lot of planets there, they stay at home a lot. They probably have a nice place depending on the houses and their age. Depending on the planets and their age. Someone has a lot of planets in the 6th house. They're going to be dealing with court cases, which is unique. They're going to be dealing with, a lot more pain than the average person. Also unique, but again, we get to experience pain. We get to experience, we can't necessarily understand what's going on, but we can relate because we can see what's happening with a court case. We can hear the court case. So even though we don't experience that, if we don't have planets in the 6th house, we can still relate to it and understand what's going on. Versus the 12th house, you cannot. Okay. Now the 7th house, it's not a unique experience because, that's your business partnerships. That's your marriages, right? Most people go through that. The 10th house, that's your career. That's your status. That's what you do in this world. Everyone has different levels of this. So again, not a unique experience. 11th house, that's your social networks. That's your dreams. That's your desires. That's your income. Okay. So the point I'm making here is if you had planets in every house but the 5th, 8th, 9th, or 12th, then you'd not be watching this video. And not only would you not be watching this video, most likely, you'd also be very much in tune with this world more than perhaps I am, because you'd have more of a perspective of what it's like to be very grounded in just being in this system. Okay. So that's what people without planets in those houses get to experience. And it's not unique, because even I can experience, you and I, most people watching this have a planet in one of those houses that I mentioned, or some significant aspects. And we, when I say you and I, I'm talking to you guys, and we can experience some things that are more, unique than the people who do not. And this is not to brag or anything like that. This is just pointing this out for your entertainment, for your knowledge, for your understanding. Okay. I wanted to mention one last thing. As I said earlier in this video, there can be strong aspects that cause you to have an understanding of these houses. There can also be planet aspects of conjunctions, for example. So, and this is a good example right here of Jupiter and the South Node, or K2. Perfect example right there. Somebody becomes spiritual in their pursuit of career. Okay, so maybe they're listening to Alan Watts while they're at work. That's an example. So it's not to say that you don't get to experience those things. It's just that if you don't have planets in those houses, it's you don't go deep into those areas. And if you don't have any, because Jupiter sits somewhere in everyone's chart. The South Node sits somewhere in everyone's chart. So especially Jupiter, when we talk about that, you're going to have a teacher that's, unless it's in the sign of Capricorn, is going to be spiritual somewhere in some area of your life. So that's just how these things work. And I wanted to mention that real quick, just as a side note, so that people could understand that everything I'm saying here is mostly true. Okay? And there are times when someone should have a spiritual experience regardless of where their planets are sitting. Just because we have, in everyone's chart, we have all the planets. And we have all the houses too, therefore. So some people will experience them more or less. We get to experience everything, but again, like I said, if you don't go super deep into that 8th house, if you don't go super deep into that 12th house, as an example, you don't know what those experiences are like. Okay, just wanted to clarify that. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. Again, please subscribe, please like the video, please share the video. Helps me so much. Thank you.